the New York Times has a piece about this today. This has to do with inequality, but not. In 1970, if you were 60 years old and lived in the top 50% of Americans, you lived about a year and a half longer before you died. This is in 1970. You lived about a year and a half longer than somebody in the bottom 50% of Americans economically. Today, if you're in the top 50% of Americans and you're a man, you live 14 years longer than somebody in the bottom 50%. And if you're a woman, it's 13 years. This is massive. And it's the result of the middle class being ripped apart, frankly. They say income inequality, but it's really the middle is sagging. Meanwhile, we've got these two trade deals, right? Trans-Pacific Partnership and TTIP, and there's several that are in consideration. TTIP is the European version of TTP. And Global Justice Now, which is based out of London, and Transit National Institute, based out of the Netherlands, just issued a statement saying that the TTIP, quote, would massively increase the ability of corporations to sue member states of the EU over measures such as windfall taxes on exceptional profits or the use of taxation as a policy instrument, such as the possible sugar tax. Despite the enormous, in other words, the Europeans want to put a tax on sugar because they're concerned about obesity and tooth decay. This will make it illegal. Despite the enormous public outcry over companies like Google and Amazon paying ridiculously small amounts of tax in the UK, the government is trying to sign us up to a trade deal that could effectively prevent us from bringing about laws that could address tax injustice. They went on to say the ability to enact effective and fair tax systems to finance vital public services is one of the defining features of sovereignty. The fact that multinational companies would be able to challenge and undermine that under TTIP is testament to the terrifying extent of the corporate grab embedded in this toxic trade deal. Global Justice Now also released research showing that foreign investors, usually multinational corporations, have already sued at least 24 countries from India to Romania in tax-related disputes. To do this, they use something known formally as the investor-state dispute settlement, a sort of secret court system only accessible to foreign corporations, which is embedded in hundreds of trade agreements. Meanwhile, we don't have the Trump clip of this, do we, from the debate? That conversation was on the TV show. Never mind. Meanwhile, over at United Technologies, which owns Carrier, the air conditioning company, whose CEO Gregory Hayes pulled down $10 million in 2014 and $20 million in 2013. Last Thursday, the company reported profits of $7.6 billion, up from $6.2 billion the year before and $5.7 billion the year before that. In fact, they had so much money left over. This was before these profits were reported, that they took $12 billion and bought back their own stock in order to jack up the price of the stock so that all of their executives got a multi-million, maybe a multi-$100 million bonus. So you'd think that company, if doing this, that it would, as Zach Carter says, you would think it would, over at Huffington Post, you would think it would trickle down to its rank and file employees, right? Well, not exactly. A week ago Wednesday, or a week ago tomorrow, I guess, Carrier, the air conditioning manufacturing wing of United Technologies, announced to a room full of, 1,000 or thereabouts workers at their factory in Indiana the following. Listen to this.
It became clear that the best way to stay competitive and protect the business for long term is to move production from our facility in Indianapolis to Monterrey, Mexico. Where we have existing facilities. Listen, I've got information that's important to share as a part of the transition. If we could go ahead, if you don't want to hear it, other people do. So let's quiet down. Thank you very much. We also intend to relocate the distribution center from Indianapolis as well. Relocating our operations to Monterey will allow us to maintain high levels of product quality at competitive prices and continue to serve the extremely price-sensitive marketplace.
Amazing. And Donald Trump actually mentioned this in the Republican debate last week. It was just a day or two old at that time. Curtis Ellis is on the line with us. He's the communications director at obamatrade.com, which is what he calls the TPP, or I call SHAFTA. He's the executive director of the American Jobs Alliance. The website is obamatrade.com. Curtis is looking at this from the perspective of a conservative and an American. I'm looking at this from the perspective of a liberal and an American. Curtis, welcome back to the program.
It's a great pleasure to be here, Tom. Seems like we both have one thing in common. We think of ourselves as Americans.
Yes, and I wish more people did. We have not put this country first with regard to trade since Richard Nixon invented this idea of trade, so-called trade agreements, as opposed to, prior to, from George Washington to Richard Nixon, it was always treaties or just internal domestic trade policy, whatever's in the best interest of the United States. Nixon, when he was basically working for Pepsi and trying to open up China, came up with this idea of these trade agreements, which are really treaties. I mean, this whole thing has been unconstitutional ever since Nixon rolled this thing out in the late 60s, early 70s.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I'd recommend everybody go look up the papers of former Senator Fritz Hollings. They're on the internet. They're posted. South Carolina senator. South Carolina's in the news now. It's a good time to look back at the letter that he wrote to President-elect Jack Kennedy, where he said, as you pursue your geopolitical strategy, just remember this. The people of South Carolina have already sacrificed so much. The textile workers of South Carolina have sacrificed more than their share in order to advance your geopolitical strategies. And that's what's been going on.
Wow.
The State Department trades away jobs, trades away our industries in this great game of risk or global chess or something like that, where in order to keep country X from going communist, we're going to give them our industries and give them our jobs. And who takes it in the neck? The Americans. And it's time to stop that. That's the latest. That's the same rationale being used for the Trans-Pacific Partnership. Oh, well, we've got to show our allies in Asia that we're there. We're going to pivot to Asia. We're going to contain China, et cetera, et cetera. In other words, and to do that, we're going to bleed our country dry. We're going to bleed our country of jobs. We're going to bleed the middle class of income so that we can make Malaysia and Vietnam stronger so they can stand up to China. Meanwhile, we're going to be a basket case.
Curtis, in the minute we have left here, there are some who are suggesting that this is just an extension of what Russell Kirk laid out in 1952, that his concern that if the middle class got too wealthy, they would start rebelling and we would see chaos in America. So let's strip America of its middle class.
Well, there's another way to look at it, the way Sam Francis and Pat Buchanan talked about it, which is liberalism is suicide of the West. We're now all
by liberalism, you're talking about open trade policy.
We don't care about America anymore. We're all global citizens. We're going to raise the Chinese out of poverty. We're going to raise the Vietnamese out of poverty. What about raising the Americans out of poverty here, folks?
Yeah, I don't consider that, Curtis, for the record, that's not liberalism. That's stupidity.
Thank you.
And I honest to God, I don't know any liberals who with a straight face make that argument. I know shills for corporations who have either D or R after their names who make that argument, but I don't know any.
There you go. There you go. We got plenty of guilty parties in both parties.
There you go. Curtis Ellis, the communications director for obamatrade.com. If you have conservative or Republican friends and you want to talk to them about the TPP, send them to obamatrade.com. You're speaking their language. Curtis, great having you on. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Good talking with you. To watch more clips from our programs, hit the Watch More Videos button over here. And please be sure to hit the handy-dandy subscribe button so you'll always be up to date. Tag, you're it.